Hello and welcome to this video on ramification. This is a term that will always show up in bonsai if you take part for long enough. That does not mean the term or how to achieve ramification is ever explained clearly. In simple terms, ramification is a term for how your tree branches, and by doing so reduces leaf size while increasing canopy density. This creates a lush display of both leaves and flowers. The first thing about ramification is branch structure. A well-ramified tree has many forks and divisions in the branches. These branches become smaller but more numerous the closer you get to the silhouette of the tree. While more numerous, they are also finer. This lets you fit all these branches in the same space. Ramification is achieved by cutting branches in a particular way. Not only do you need to cut the branches back so as to keep newer, younger branches on the periphery, but also promote the right growth. We've mentioned that branches need to divide. This is just like forks in a road with each going left or right. Each branch in your tree is cut so as to allow the new growth to be on these forks, which should create a geometric increase to the number of branches. 1 becomes 2, which becomes 4, which becomes 8, and so on. The problem with this approach is that you need to have enough room in your tree shape or style to fit this constantly dividing structure. One way to do this is by cutting along the main branch. You can then ramify along the branches which shoot off from this main branch. It gets you a strong amount of growth along the entirety of the branch. The second is to cut in a way that promotes binary division only when you get to the leaf pads. This creates dense leaf pads and sections of largely bare branches in between. The way you keep the shape with both of these approaches in the long term will require you to eventually grow a new replacement main branch, and then cut the old branch off. Sometimes you can grow the new branch from a point on the original branch closer to the trunk. Other times it will be an entirely new branch from the trunk which will take over this role. When you cut the branch, you cut it back to the first node or branch juncture after the last time you cut the branch. With new trees, this can be quite aggressive. With established trees that are well maintained, it can be extremely short distances. You repeat this both throughout the growing season and as required in order to keep the newest growth in a division of 2. Always 2, never more, and obviously rarely less if your branch is going to keep growing. The advantage to these smaller and more frequent branches is a reduction in leaf size. A small branch can only support a small leaf. The tree will also create smaller leaves to provide more surface area for more chlorophyll to then photosynthesize. This provides 2 benefits: more leaves and smaller leaves. This creates the lush, dense canopy we mentioned. Each branch should end in 1 or more leaves. The more branch ends, the more leaves. Each time you prune the branches back and remove the leaves on these branches, you encourage more smaller leaves to grow. This is the tree trying to compensate for the loss by quickly making more small leaves that can photosynthesize. These leaves will have scaled with your tree as it's growing. That ensures that the size of these new small leaves is commensurate with your tree size overall. While leaves are smaller, they are not the only thing to shrink. Flowers can also shrink, but also become more plentiful as a result. Much like with leaves, each branch end will end in a flower. Some species of tree will only grow flower buds on second-year growth, which is important to remember, especially when pruning. Let's start with normal circumstances. Flowers generally grow from the same location as leaves and branches. Ramification should increase the number of locations where flowers can grow from. This is done by cutting at a point just above the branch node. This allows for some dieback, and you can always clean the excess away later. The branches grow out from here. They also develop any flower nodes that do not appear at the branch ends. Now for those exceptions. When you have a tree that only flowers or fruits on second year growth, you need to cut for ramification a little bit differently. You see here the location of both leaf nodes for new branches, leaves, and flowers. They are somewhat exclusionary to each other if you want ramification. The best option is to cut the branch at a node one step further away than normal. This allows you to leap over nodes where flowers and fruit will develop. The normally cut node will ramify as usual. The branches growing from the other node will flower. You can then cut these back as per normal. Changing the side, you let flower and then repeat this on the other node on alternate years. This is a much slower than normal process, but lets you have a full display of flowers all over your tree. The final benefit of ramification is perhaps less appreciated, but important in its own way. The more branches forming new shoots, the more you divide the tree's growth. This will slow down the growth, which in turn reduces the amount of effort you need to go to train your tree through pruning, not necessarily wiring though. The more forks there are, the more small wiring you'll need to do to keep the tree styled in the particular way it needs to be done. In general terms, this does mean that the better ramified your tree, the less work you need to do with it when it comes to pruning, but the more when it comes to wiring. Ultimately, once you've achieved the right silhouette, it's very much a case of simply maintaining the right branches, and you can be very targeted and specific. While ramification is a simple enough term, it's important to get it right. When done wrong, you stunt tree growth, lose branches, have thin foliage, disproportionate leaf size, a pitiful floral display, and almost no fruit. Getting it right makes your tree look that much better than you could initially imagine. This is why ramification is one of the words that is always thrown around in bonsai, and why no matter what, you will eventually come across it. Good ramification makes for good bonsai, and contributes strongly to the proper image of a aged, established bonsai tree. Without this, it simply doesn't look right. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.